So, and returning back to education later on in life, when my head was more interested in learning, or I discovered my own way to learn because I suffer from chronic anxiety. So at school, learning wasn't for me. So later on in life, when I developed or realised what I had and what I had to work with, I figured out how I could learn, and I've been addicted to learning ever since. So for us to be able to offer these opportunities for people like yourselves who may or may not be academic, but working towards something that you can be proud of is an absolute blessing for us at Education Base, and we're happy to have you here. So welcome. That was a bit of a spiel there, a bit of a entrance. So
beautiful, mate. It was beautiful as ever.
I'll hand you over to Mr. Nurve, Raf over there.
I will just make you host. Change host. There we go. Cool. Thank you very much for the handover, Andrew. Cheers, mate. And yeah. So thanks for coming, everyone. My name's Raf Direnzo, aka Nurve, aka Demon, and also one of the founding members of the grime outfit Macabre Unit. I started my journey in the late 90s as a DJ. I quickly got on the circuit by the age of 16. Was DJing in clubs around my town and the surrounding areas, and I quickly got it's more the curiosity for music production, and I wanted to learn how this music was made. So after a couple of years, I started to work in a record shop, which helped me develop my DJing skills no end. But in that time, I started to produce from the same town as Andrew and some other friends. We were all kind of coming through the ranks together and playing at similar sort of clubs and stuff. And so I started by making drum and bass. And back then in the late 90s or the early noughties, as they say, it wasn't as easy as just opening up a door and just making music. You had to have quite a little bit of money to get a half decent setup. And being 18, 19, I didn't have a lot of money. So the setup I had kind of reflected that. It was okay, and I learned a lot from it, but I certainly wasn't able to make music like the drum and bass artists that I looked up to and stuff. So I kind of just carried on doing it. But then as I got to my early 20s, or no, I'd say probably late teens, early 20s, a friend of mine said, Raf, there's this new music called grime. We should try it out. And at that time, the game on the PlayStation called Music came out. We started to tinker about on there, and from there we learned that we could make grime on the PlayStation, but then Reason come out shortly after that, and we started to make grime on Reason, and that actually sculpted the Macabre Unit sound. Reason was the reason why Macabre Unit sounded the way that it did, with the square basses, if you're familiar with that material. Anyhow, we rode that way for quite some time. We was one of the first artists on 1Xtra, or nearly 18 years ago now. Went on Radio 1 with Plastician. Had number 1s and number 2s in the 1Xtra chart when they had the UK Garage chart. And it was quite an amazing time. And this was like, before the internet. So it was all about connecting with artists, going to clubs, and we was very active, and it was a really good time. And, just like most things change. People, my sound changed. I carried on developing technically, and I then found that I wasn't really making grime anymore. So I started to hear about this new music called dubstep that was kicking about all like 12, 13 years ago, 14 years ago even. And I sort of latched onto that and started to do my thing. It took me about 3 years to even sort of find my feet, because I always kind of tend to do things a little bit differently. Sometimes much to my detriment, where everyone goes left and I go right, and it's not intentional, it's just how I'm programmed, sort of thing. So it was kind of a little bit tough to get into the dubstep scene with all the other dubstep artists, but I sort of latched onto this sort of different sound, which was a fusion of drum and bass and dubstep, more like a neuro-y sort of sound. And I hooked up with some artists, one called Biome, another one called Versa and Endred, and we started to make what is kind of known as the mud sound. And it's Macabre Unit Digital. I rebirthed Macabre Unit into a more sort of moodier dubstep sort of brand, and I started the label. That just blew up immediately. Took me touring all over the world, 2 North American tours. It's amazing, an amazing time. And again, like all good things, they started to slow down. I started to change, and I sort of went back to my first love, which is jungle drum and bass. I finally got the skill set. Well, you know, I believe that I finally got the skill set together to start to actually make it on a serious sort of level. It only took me about 18, 19 years, but you know, I suppose better late than never. And now I focus mostly on writing drum and bass. I still class myself as a multi-genre artist because I do like to tinker about with other genres and stuff. But my main focus is drum and bass. I'm also an instructor, an educator for Education and Bass, and also very blessed and privileged to work full-time for Education and Bass as partnerships and content manager. Yeah, and that's pretty much me, I'd say.
Yeah, nice one, Raf. So yeah, just to recap on what we're going to be doing. So Raf's going to get stuck in a second with Ableton 11, which is Ableton's new update, and which actually you can download a trial that's it's valid for 90 days, a free trial. But anything we show you here, there's not necessarily exclusive to Ableton. There's a lot of transferable skills and knowledge as well. It's just we appreciate a lot of people use different platforms. We're definitely big believers of it's all about your ideas and whether you can lay your ideas down in whichever way is most convenient, comfortable, or effective to you as a producer or an artist. So, but yeah, we're going to be using Ableton 11 and try it out because it's quite different to other DAWs, the workflow and, you know, sound design capabilities and the fact that you can use it for a performance tool as well, which is really cool. So you can use it as like a DJ tool or live performance, and that's what I'll be showing you a bit later on, some basics on how to use Ableton as a performance tool. Because, you know, performing goes hand in hand with producing, or at least in electronic music, the two kind of things go hand in hand. But I'm going to hand you over to Raf now, who's going to get stuck in and show you some quick kind of tips and tricks how to get you off the starting blocks and to use Ableton as quickly as possible, really, as quickly as you can lay down your ideas. So, yeah. Raf.
Cheers. Cool. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen. Share sound. It's already ticked. How kind of it. I always forget that and end up not sharing my sound. Cool. Okay, so here is the Ableton arrangement view. This is the view that I use all of the time. And what Andrew will be touching on will be the session view after. So what I want to cover here is some audio, some MIDI, how to use a sampler, the synth, and creating some groups and some folders to really help with the workflow, because as Andrew said, Ableton is renowned for its workflow, and I'm gonna try and do that in 10 minutes. That's how much of good it is with workflow. So we'll start with audio. So here I already have an audio channel that's available to me. If I right click, I can create as many as I like, along with MIDI channels as well. You can also drag and drop audio to create an audio channel, which I'll show you. So I'll leave these two here, and we're going to start with drums. So what I've done here so far, if we just look here, this is my little folder. It's called Ableton Masterclass. Now, I just thought I'd prepare this briefly because you don't want to see me scrolling through kick drums for 20 minutes or snares, which we do as producers. So I've also got this other folder here, which is called Ableton Masterclass Sounds. Now I'll show you how to create them. So up here you can see these colors. It's all color coded. So what I did is I went into drums and I spent 20 minutes scouring through the drums. And when I found the hit that I liked, I right clicked and I added it to my group that I named Ableton Masterclass. And then it just dropped it in here. Now, what it did is created a little group for me, which allows me to just quickly pluck off the sounds. Now, I have a few here. I have drums, third party, and it's all to help with my workflow. If I find 5 kick drums that I really like, I mean, you know, are you going to be using any more than 5 kick drums? You know, if you find really good kick drums, save them, use them again, because, you know, you've got 100 kick drums, no point scouring through them. Find the ones you want and just add them to your own little folder here. So we'll start with a kick slam. I'll just quickly play you through the sounds I've got. So we'll start with a kick. Now I can drag this kick into an audio channel that's already created, and there it is. Or I can drag it into this area here, which it says drop files and devices here, and it will automatically create an audio channel. You know, however you wish to do it. So what I want to start with first is the kick on this channel, and then a snare on this channel. Now I've set my tempo to 175 BPM. That's what I work at for my drum and bass. And you literally can just move up and down, or you could just type it in 175 and then hit return, and that's it. Now when I'm laying my drums, I like to use the metronome just to make sure that I am kind of in time and I'm not just throwing things around, and I could just get stuff moving quite quickly that way. So this is the metronome, and the metronome is a bleep, which if we play it here, and it keeps you in time. It's like a counter. So, and that changes. If you change the BPM, it will change the metronome. Of course, it goes with the tempo of the track. So let me just press play. So right now, I want to duplicate this kick drum. So I'm going to left click, I'm going to move it, and just before I let go of it on the section, I'm going to press Option and let go, and it duplicates it. There are other ways. You can highlight a section and you can press Command D. It also does the same thing. So again, drag, drop. Let's make this a little bit bigger so you can see. Now, I quite like that as a very simple break. Now I want to copy this whole section to here, and here. I'm working with 4 bars. This is 1 bar. I want to work with 4 bars because the idea that I've got in mind will take up 4 bars. And it's a good place to start as well, because here we are building a boiling pot, which is working down before we work across. Now, of course, we're not going to fill every single channel working down because, you know, time and stuff, but you'll kind of get the idea. So anyway, I've highlighted this section. I want to duplicate this section 3 times to the right. So what I'm going to do, Command D, and Command D. And now we have our drums laid across 4 bars. So we can throw in a little snap kick here, you know, just because we can. The metronome. Now, you don't want a metronome on all of the time. Well, I certainly don't. And I think now that we've got the drums down, I think we've got a pretty good guidance. We can use the drums as the metronome, because now we're going to move on to some hi-hats, so some percussive elements to complement the drums. So I'm going to turn that off now. And just so that you know, it's up here, the metronome, just in case. And also the tempo is up there as well. So now I'm going to right click. Now the reason I right click and insert audio tracks is because that's what I'm used to doing. That's it. So I just do that. But by all means, you'll find your own way. So first I want to add a closed hat. I'm going to drag that in. Just going to make this a bit bigger so we can see. And I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm just going to duplicate this across 3 times to 1 bar. And then again. So we have that closed hat across 4 bars. So now we're going to look at the shaker. So it's another percussive element.
So 1 second, Raf, the audio level on the door is a little bit louder than your voice.
Okay, cool.
Quite a bit louder, actually.
We'll drop it down to -9. Give it a quick test. How's that, okay?
Perfect. Perfect, mate.
Cool, lovely. Okay, so we're going to drag the shaker in. I'll just knock that down so we can see a little bit clearer here what we're doing. Bring the shaker in, and just going to fill this little gap here. So just going to duplicate this. So, you know, we haven't got the hats hitting at the same place. So we've got the closed hat here, shaker here, closed hat here, shaker here. And they're just kind of complementing each other, just working together. Of course, you can experiment with this stuff. I find that with shakers as well, because they have this very, you know, if we look at the waveforms very briefly, the closed hat has a very sharp transient. And here, the shaker, you can see, it's very gradual, has a lot of attack on it, which allows for a lot more movement, and you can place it maybe just a little bit off grid to give it more of an organic sound. But we won't go too deep into that, but feel free to experiment with that, because you can get some really nice syncopation and movement, and you know, it can sound really nice. Again, I'm just going to duplicate this over and we'll have a listen. So you can hear it's starting to take shape. Now, one of the things, I think, you know, the hi-hats are maybe a little bit loud. So if we look over here, we have this 0. This is your channel volume. Now, if we wanted to, up here, we can flip it to the mixer. So we'll do that. And here are your faders. So if you want to adjust the volume with the faders on the mixer, then you can do that. But I always use these. It's just a habit that I've got into. It is the same thing. It just, yeah, it just allows me to just lower the volume however much I wish. Now, I think personally that the closed hat is a little bit too loud. So I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. So we'll go to -3 dB. We won't get too caught up in this, but I just think they're a bit loud. And I wanted to show you how you can just quickly adjust the volume of certain sounds if you wanted to. And it's the same with the shaker. We'll bring it down to, I think that's a little bit louder, so we'll go to -6. And I think that's a bit better. Now for the last piece of percussion, I have a ride, which we can drop in here. Now, you can lengthen and shorten the audio by just grabbing the end of it here, and you could just drag it back. And it's as simple as that. You just hold down left and you drag it wherever you want to drag it. Now, this works quite well if you want to shorten the sound, of course, and lengthen it. But you also might find that because this ends quite abruptly here, you might want to put a fade on. You can see already these little blocks. That will allow you to fade the audio. So it's nice and clean when it ends. And on the flip of that, you can also do it on the front. So you've got that control. Now, the one thing to bear in mind is that up here, we have this button that will turn that off and activate the automation, which is a whole different story. We're not going to go into that. But turn off will allow you to adjust the fades. Turn it on will activate the automation. So we'll apply a little fade here. And I'm going to keep this very simple, this ride. I just want to have it in here, just every bar. I think it's a little bit too loud, so here we're going to turn it down slightly. We'll go with 4.5, so sitting just in between these levels here. Now, these aren't the volumes that you should go by. This is just me just going by ear. You know, I might listen to it tomorrow and turn them down a lot more, turn them back up. But That's just what I'm going with right now. So here are our drums. They're okay. Now we can move on to some more, well, I say fun stuff. I quite find drums a lot of fun, but basses are a lot more fun. So I'm just going to make these smaller. You can collapse these channels so that you can see a lot more with these little arrows here, and just collapse them. Now we are going to use a sampler to bring the basses into this arrangement page and use the basses in the track. Now down here we have Ableton Masterclass Sounds. If I click that, I have my basses. Now if we look here where it says add folder, if you click that, it will open up your computer, whether it's Finder or wherever your documents are on your PC, and you can add any folder from your computer, whether you've created it or it's there already. So if you create yourself a sample pack and you want to bring it in here, because remember, it's all about workflow, you can open up your Finder and drag sounds in, but for workflow purposes, it makes sense just to have it here. If you know that you've got a nice sample pack of 50 sounds, you could just call on them here. And here they are. And you can have as many as you want in there. So we're going to use the sampler. Ableton has a really good stock sampler. Insert MIDI track. And we'll go to Instruments, which is here. Click on Instruments and we select the sampler. Now there are other instruments here too, but we're going to use a sampler this time. And again, you can drag it down here, or you can double click when your channel is highlighted and it will drop it into that channel. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. So this is the sampler. It's quite a simple sampler, but it has a lot of very cool parameters. You could do a lot with it. Now we'll go back to the Ableton Masterclass sounds and we will listen to the bass. Now I want to use this bass first. So what I do here is I will drag it, left click, and drag it straight here. And that's it. The sound, I'm going to hit the key on my keyboard now. That's now in my sampler. The one thing to know about the Ableton sampler, its default is -12 dB, which is quite quiet. So when you put your sound into the sampler, you might think, oh, that's very quiet, I want to turn it up. So here where it says filter and global, click that, and volume will be at -12. I'll say we bring it up to 0, and then we can adjust it. If we want to turn it down, we can adjust it by the mixer volume here, or the channel volume. Now, there is one very important thing to remember. If we go back to sample, when you import a sound into the sampler, if your sound, like mine here, is in E, which is the root note, this sound has been created in the note of E, your root note here must also be in E. Otherwise, it will get very confusing when you start playing the notes when the sampler thinks it's in C because you've left it in C when actually you're playing it in a totally different note. It's going to get very confusing and you're going to be like, why is this? These sounds just sound crazy. So as you can see now, I've changed the root note to E. So when I press E on my keyboard, it is E. It's not C or another sound. So now we've got that all out in the open, we can record a bass in. Now you can do this two ways. With this record button up here, if I press that, you can see that it started to record. It's created a MIDI clip automatically and it's starting to record. There's nothing in the MIDI clip because I didn't press any keys on my keyboard to record anything. But you heard the metronome there give a counting of 1 bar. And then it begins. You can change that to 2 bars, I believe, or 4 bars, or I think you can take it off completely. It's good to have a count in, because then you can prep yourself to play what you want to play. Now that's one way of doing it. So I'm going to show you that quickly. I'm going to work in E flat minor because that's what I work in. You can work in whatever you want. F is a great note, E is a great note, even C, whatever you want to work in. I'm sure you'll find your own keys that you like to work in. But mine is E flat minor. So we'll hit record. So there's a little bit of a delay on that, but you can see it's recorded the MIDI. So I'm now going to double click on this MIDI clip. And here is my MIDI. Here's the piano roll. So it tells me that I've recorded it. It says D sharp here, but that's E flat. D sharp is E flat. Now, that's quite off. I wanted that to be on. So you could just pick it up and move it. Now, if I was just off a little bit here, let's just say, I could quantize it. So I could right click, press quantize, and it will move it to the closest beat. If I was a bit closer to this beat, it would move it here. But because I was closer to the first beat, moved it here. So right click and quantize. You can do that when you have multiple MIDI hits as well. You can highlight them all, right click and quantize. So we've just moved that on. We can bring the MIDI clip back a bit. And also you can adjust the length of the MIDI clip as well. And it all depends on how long your sample is in the sampler. We can adjust the length just in the same way as we did with the audio. So let's have a listen. Now I think that's a suitable place, so I'm quite happy with that. So we'll quickly move on. We'll create another MIDI track. We will open up another sampler. And we'll go back to my folder. And now I want to grab another bass. And I think we'll go with that one. So same thing, drag it in. And we can now, I'll show you a different way to get it in. So that first time we recorded it in. If you just highlight a section by left clicking, in fact, we're going to go all the way to the end of the second bar. If you right click, we'll say insert empty MIDI clip. We now have a MIDI clip for this channel with this sound. Go inside it. Because we're working in E flat minor, we will stick with that to keep it simple. And if you look here actually, because this little headphone thing, we turn it on, it's now blue. It means now you can play the notes. If it's turned off, you won't be able to hear nothing. So it's another little thing to bear in mind. Now I'm going to stretch that all of the way. And the way I did that, sorry, I just jumped ahead there. It's by double clicking. Double click, double click, double click. And it will drop a MIDI note wherever you are. And you can stretch it however you wish to. So we'll go to the end. Now you can hear that's a bit quiet again. So we'll go back into the sampler. We'll bring the volume up to 0. So that's 2 basses in there already. Now I personally feel that this second one's a little bit loud, so we'll just turn it down by 3 dB. And now let's move on to the final bass. So again, right click, another MIDI track, instrument, sampler, we'll get the final bass. Now, I've actually forgotten to do something, which is change the root note on this one. Now if we look back in here, it's in F. That tells me this sounds in F. So I need to change this root note to F. Because otherwise, if you try and lay some different musicality over the top of it, that's when you're going to start hearing it's not quite sounding right. Sounds a bit better. So let's grab this final bass. We'll drag it in. We will change the root note to F. And we'll change the volume to 0 because I'm going to assume that it's going to be quiet as well. And what we're going to do is I'm going to risk recording it in, but I feel because of the latency, it's going to really make my piano skills not look very, very sharp. But we're going to do it anyway because we live on the edge around here. So let me just get my notes in check. Okay, here we go. It's not bad. So that's now recorded in. I'll just delete this little clip here because it's overlapped from the loop. Now, I just want to touch on the loop thing quickly because I didn't actually do that. I should have really touched on that first. Now, you see these markers here at the top. These are your loop markers. So, for example, if you bring them here and we press left and put the marker here, it's going to loop that section. Now, the only way that works is if we have the loop turned on here. Turn it off and it won't loop. Turn it on and it will loop. And you can loop any section of your track. It's literally left click and drag it across. So that's how we're looping this section. Let's jump back to the bass. Now, this is where we could potentially use the quantize. So we left click, highlight them all, and quantize. Now, because my piano skills are not that sharp, I'm going to blame the latency. It's quantized it to the nearest beat, but it's not really the beat that I wanted. So I'm going to have to manually move them back. And we can add some other notes if we want. Because, you know, you can record stuff in, but then it gives you the option to add some more notes. And we can stretch them. And, you know, we could sit here and move notes around and stuff all day long, but I think you get the gist of what you can do here. You know, it tells you the notes that you've keyed in. You can move them up and down. You know, you can switch them around. You can do whatever you like in here with these notes. So I think the one thing that I noticed with this bass earlier, and I think it gives me a good opportunity to show you just a couple of the little parameters in the sampler, is here we have it's the envelope of the sampler. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but the attack will give the sound a bit more of a sort of slope, so it won't just trigger straight away. So this is the shape of your sound. So imagine this is the front of your sound. This is the shape of it. Now this is good for removing clicks. In the same way that we put fades on the audio, this is a similar way for the sampler so that you can remove any clips. But what I also want to do on the sample itself is, you can see here, if we zoom in, you can see that there's a little bit of a delay. So I just want to bring that start point in. Now you can hear a clip there. So that's where we bring the attack. And the bass just sounds a little bit different. It's a bit more punchier. We won't go too deep into that stuff because it can get quite technical, and it's a bit of a long sort of subject to get into. So now we can look at the last couple of sounds, which is synthesis. Now synthesis will have to also work on a MIDI track. So we create a MIDI track, and we'll go back to my original folder, which is Ableton Masterclass. And I've got two sounds here. One is from the Ableton Wavetable, which is their own stock synth, and also the Operator, which is another Ableton stock synth. So this pad is from the Wavetable. So we're on the MIDI track. I'm going to double click here, and it's opened up the Wavetable. Now, we're not even going to be looking at any of this. I'm just going to show you how we can get a little bit of ambience and musicality in this boiling pot. So I'm thinking that's quite a nice note, and I'm just going to hit record and just press some keys. Now, as you can see here, because of the loop, it's looped over and it's actually deleted what we recorded on the first note. But if you just pull back, see, split it in half here. If we pull back, then it brings that note back up. So you haven't lost it. If you've got it on a cycle, it will just keep recording if you keep pressing play. So again, we can double click in here. We can highlight them all or select them all. Right click and quantize. Nearly. Still a bit off. The latency's showing me up today. So we're just tidying it up here. We're just bringing these notes back. And then we have sounds okay. And we'll move on to the last sound, which is a little pluck, small pluck, which we can create just a little melody with maybe. But I think with this it'll be safer to draw it, because otherwise I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff, my hands on a keyboard, and it's going to sound like a mess. So we're just going to create a little MIDI clip, insert empty MIDI clip. We should probably bring the pluck in. So this is the other way of doing it. You drag it in and we've opened the instrument. Now it's important to remember as well that here, it's red here. That means this track is armed. So when I press the keys on my keyboard, it will play this channel. But if I turn this one on, it will now play the pluck. So that's how you would go from sound to sound if you have different synths or sounds in samplers like here. But we want to work with the pluck. So if we just draw in, we'll just randomly draw something in. And we'll go. Let's keep it simple. We'll have something quite short, and we'll just duplicate in the same way that we did with the audio. We could duplicate the MIDI, Command D. It's a little bit loud. Maybe we could turn that down so it's not so intrusive. And again, just here to the right, you can mute channels and solo them. So the yellow bar will turn the channel off, then back on. When you hit the S, when it's blue, it's soloed. And we can solo each channel. So we can hear all the individual channels as they're playing as well. And then if you just hit unsolo, or not, if you just press this blue soloed button, it unsolos all of the channels. Now, just to quickly go back to these sounds here. These three sounds here, I actually got them from our very own sample portal on E&B Sounds. So if you like them basses, they're all available on here with hundreds, in fact well over 1,000 sounds that we've got from all of the E&B instructors. And here you can see them all, and you can preview them and you can download them. There's patches, samples, so many basses, foghorns to Reese basses, kick drums and snares. And this is available as part of our VIP membership, along with, if you are signed up to the EBRSL, you also get a VIP membership, which means you get access to our very own sample portal. and there's absolutely loads of sounds in here. I use it quite frequently to gain some inspiration, download some sounds and use them. Works really well. So that is here. If we look on sounds, click sounds, and it will take you here. And if you're signed in with your VIP account, you can download and listen to any of the sounds that you wish. So as far as boiling pots go, I mean, I could sit here for hours and add stuff, and I've probably well overshot my 10-minute mark, I would say. And I believe, let me just check my notes. Yeah, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover, and probably some as well. So yeah.
Nice one, Ref.
Cool. I will stop sharing my screen once I find it on my 7 screens that I've got. Anyway, here we go. Looking everywhere like, where is it?
I'm just going to make you the host again, mate.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just want to, there's a few questions about, are we going to record, or are we recording, and will it be available? Yes, we're recording, and as long as the gremlins don't do us like they did last week, then we'll have it up potentially on YouTube or something, but we'll make sure it'll be available for anybody to watch back. I did put something in the chat, just a message saying, don't feel like, especially if you haven't touched any music making software, as easy as Raf made it look, there's a lot to it. And even though that might have appeared easy to some of us, there's, you know, to others it may not have been. So the point of this session isn't for you to try and remember everything, because, you know, it's virtually impossible. We'll provide the recording, and, you know, we'll give you access to kind of ways and means to deep dive this sort of content if that's your chosen thing. We want to try and start to build a community and get more into kind of mentoring artists and stuff as well. In a second, I'm going to get into how to use Ableton as a performance tool, which is really fun, and actually it can be an alternative way to create in Ableton, more like performing. So it's kind of where Raf was obviously using pre-existing audio, which is the printed sound, and then performing on his MIDI controller and recording the individual notes in and stuff. There's another way to do it whereby you create your parts and then you trigger them in real time like a performance, and I'm going to show you that in just a second, which is really fun, and a lot of the house and techno producers use that way of working, and it can be really effective. It's a whole unique workflow. Before I do that, I want to mention that when we started the session, I was talking about our EBRSL graded syllabus, which is our 1-year program. I'm going to put a link in the chat to that course. It's a 1-year course, and it's over 90 hours long, and it's the equivalent, you work your way up towards the equivalent of a level 3 UK qualification, and it's literally no stone unturned. When I tell you it's the theory of sound, acoustic treatment for your room, setting up your monitors, what sound is, how it works, how to mix it, how to master it, synthesis, sound design, it literally is that no stone unturned course over the space of a year. You study for 42 weeks, and as long as you've got 2-3 hours a week to kind of watch the content and practice, after 42 weeks you've got an extra 10 weeks to prepare for a listening test exam, a multiple choice exam, and a project which will go towards your grade. You do all of the education between grades 1 and 6, and towards the end we put you in for the qualification that based on your ability at that time. Our first cohort, the January cohort, we had many people on there, in fact quite a few that had been making music for about 10 years and just wanted to kind of fill in the gaps and have a qualification, and something that's, as I said before, it's internationally recognised qualification. And much like what it did for me, I was self-taught, and I returned back to education to do a master's degree. Now, the only reason I got accepted onto that master's was because of my industry experience. Masters, I mean, I didn't even have a GCSE to my name, which is the qualifications that you're supposed to leave school with. Didn't even have a GCSE. So the last thing I wrote about was the Big Friendly Giant, the BFG, and I went from that to like doing a master's, which is level 7 education, one below PhD, and one, it nearly killed me because I was like, what is this? research methods, like my first research methods thing, you know, the professor may as well been speaking another language. In fact, I'm sure he was. But anyway, what that did for me, just filling in the gaps, and at master's level, you're kind of already expected to know what the theory of sound is, what the theory of synthesis is, what music theory is, and all the bits and bobs that filled in the gaps for me. And I can honestly say, for someone that didn't come from an academic background or wasn't a fan of education at all, what it did for me was just absolutely mind-blowing. Like, the fact that I can research, the fact I can apply myself, the fact that I can project manage, the fact that I can presentation skills and all the things that come with applying yourself to that sort of thing, is just amazing. So like I said before, it's a great thing for us to be able to offer something for someone that may wish to do that. It starts off at beginners, so grassroots, and then it ramps up over the space of 42 weeks, and it will kind of facilitate people that have been making music for some time. So yes, there's a bit of a plug there, but it's a very, very valuable thing. And it's really, really close to my heart. It's something quite special. So we're going to drop the link in the chat, and also a discount code as well. If you want to do it, obviously great. But in addition to what we're doing here, we've got monthly memberships that you can dip in and out of, no commitment. So you can actually just sign up for $9.99, binge on all the content, go away and kind of, you know, come back when you feel to do so, if that's your route. The other last thing I will add, there's a 9-hour Ableton course delivered by DJ Rap. It's an Ableton 101. So it is literally the ins and outs of Ableton from scratch, pretty much teaching you the manual. And then obviously you can go off, and the world's your oyster then once you know the ins and outs of how a DAW works. So yeah, that's my little kind of my little plug there, but hopefully, you know, you see the value in that stuff as well, and obviously you're under no obligation whatsoever. So we will drop the link there. We're enrolling now for a when does it start, Raf?
So the cohort begins, the April cohort begins on the 9th of April, so enrollment closes on the 8th.
Cool. So I've dropped that link in the chat there. I think Raf's got a discount code he'll drop in as well.
I will follow up now with the discount code.
And I'm going to get stuck into, yeah, showing you how to kind of, the basics of how to use Ableton as a performance tool, which is quite fun. And also the same technique can be used for composing as well. So, everything good with my screen there, Raf? All good, yeah?
Yeah, all looks good to me, mate.
Sweet. So when you were with Raf just now, he had you in this view, and at the top right here, I'm flicking us to clip view, and we've got all these interesting parts here, which are my audio parts that are split up into drums, bass, effects, instruments, more drums, full tracks, miscellaneous kind of vocal interlude type stuff, and then I've used some of the Ableton pack stuff just to kind of put that into context. So back in 2001 I used Ableton as a performance tool to do my first live PA in Holland, and I was amongst one of the first to use Ableton in this way. I think myself, Josh Wink, and a couple of others in the scene were known to be doing Ableton live sets, but I haven't touched Ableton seriously for many years. I used to do my production on Logic and my live sets on Ableton, but it's cool. You can use it like a DJ tool as well, which is really fun. So what you do is, and again, please don't worry, you don't have to know all of this. We've got, or we'll have in-depth courses on all of this and stuff like that if you choose to do it, and this recording will go up on YouTube for you to kind of be able to follow along at any time as well. Down the bottom right here, you have this cross, which is basically a crossfader. And it opens up a crossfader. If you're familiar with how DJing works, you've got a little mixer with a crossfader in the middle, and the way it works on the typical DJ setup, you'll have 2 channels, and you will you'll play a song, and the idea is to go from one song into another by seamlessly mixing and blending them, and for a duration of time, 2 of those songs will play at the same time, and you create a new song from a combination of the 2 songs playing. That's essentially what DJing is. So you've got this little kind of crossfader tool here. So obviously when the crossfader is central, you will hear essentially 2 tracks at the same time. But what that means in Ableton is I've assigned, on my track section here, I've assigned the left side of the crossfader to A and the right side to B. And I've got a couple of my tracks here. I'll just make sure my master level isn't too loud. So I'll press play on one of the tracks here. You can obviously assign this to a MIDI controller. Ableton have push. I used to just have an Oxygen 8 MIDI controller with loads of tape on it. Each key, I had Amen break, Reese break, this track, that track. Honestly, my MIDI controller was taped up and it went around the world, and half the keys were like diving boards up in the air and bent, and it was quite a random looking thing that was my MIDI controller back in 2001. But now you have things like obviously Ableton Push, you have various other controllers that can kind of help you just trigger things without having to use the mouse. But I'm going to show you with the mouse so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to press play on one track, but I'm going to put the crossfader fully over to the left, so the left being track A here, and I'll press play there. Is that level okay, Raf, compared to my voice?
Yeah, sounds fine, mate.
Sweet. I'll tell you what I do so I don't have to speak about it first. I'm going to play track 1, Blind Man. Then I'm going to press play on track 2. You won't hear it until I start to bring it into the crossfader central, and then take it fully over to the right to eventually end up on the track Stomp.
See, of all things, to live in darkness must be the worst.
Fear is the only darkness. You think I cannot see. What do you hear?
I hear the water. I hear the birds.
Do you hear your own heartbeat?
Oh man, how is it that you hear these things?
Young man, how is it that you do not?
So what I didn't do, which I would normally do in a DJ scenario, is obviously I had both tracks dropping at the same time with their bass. You can set up an EQ and you can drop the lows out. You wouldn't necessarily, well, you know, some DJs still leave the bass with 2 tracks in, and it can actually be quite interesting. It can certainly blow your head off on a sound system. Back in the day, the likes of Andy C and Youngster just used to leave the bass in. Now people do more of kind of dropouts to make sure it doesn't clash. So that's one way of using it, but which is really cool. So you can have like multiple tracks and you can just straight up DJ with it. But I like to obviously, and some people do, many people do it, and you know, it's fine, but actually I'd rather just use the CDJs if I'm going to do that. But actually it's a good entry point into kind of learning, because you've got all these visual representations, and I mean, so is the DJ software, but because you're maybe deciding to use this as a compositional tool, it just keeps it in the environment and, you know, gives you a deeper understanding of how Ableton can work. So the other way that I use it, the primary way I use it, is I will split my own tracks out into stems and individual hits, and I'll improvise as well by firing up a synth or a virtual instrument and kind of jamming out alongside it. I'm not overly accomplished when it comes to being able to just jam out live, but might do a little basic chord progression if I'm feeling brave. But generally just splitting it out into stems. So I've got and the way it works is, so horizontally, you can only play kind of one clip from each. I'll call this, apologies, I haven't got the terminology down for Ableton, but I'll call this, just based on like an Excel spreadsheet, a column. Here you can only play one clip at a time, but you can play multiple going across horizontally, which is like your rows, but it can go, you can play random clips. For example, the drums here.
Probably turn that up by 3 dB, Andrew, if you want, on the master. Yeah, it's cool.
And so it goes on.
Bruv, the chat's going off like it's a radio stream, live stream, bruv. People are wanting the rewinds and all sorts, mate. I'm here skanking out. You're getting a free set right now. That's sick, man. That's so sick.
So it's basically, so this is all my parts. So obviously these are stems from tracks that, if you know my music, you might recognize. A lot of the early stuff, actually. Some of this dates back to like the early, like the Japan EP, which was the very first Nomine release, and then more recent bit, well no, not more recent bits, all of this is like 7 years old, like stems from tracks that are 7 years old. And then I've got miscellaneous bits like this.
When I hear what we call music, it seems to me that someone is talking, and talking about his feelings or about his ideas of relationships.
Whenever we hear sounds, we are changed. We are no longer the same after having heard certain sounds. And this is the more the case when we hear organized sounds, organized by another human being. Music. 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 At about 1950, it was no longer self-understood that a sound is a sound. Music. Because the idea to compose the sounds themselves, music. A sound is a sound, 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 music. A sound is a sound.
Yeah, it could be a lot of fun.
Mate, I'm having a right old time here, man.
And I haven't looked. I literally pulled this project out because I wanted to show like how to use Ableton in this way. And literally, I haven't opened this project for 7 years. I did it for some of my students at Bedford College, and then I was going to put a live set together for my album tour, and I never actually got to do it, which was a shame. But I'm working on a couple of really interesting projects at the moment, so hopefully when things open back out I can go out there and do this. So in addition to that though, you can still use the full length tracks, so you can decorate around it, so like with Blind Man or whatever. Yeah, anyway, sorry, so when you've got something like Blind Man that is not playing, because why is that not playing? Bizarre, I may have gone offline for whatever reason. Anyway. You can kind of just put your other loops around it, and kind of, so you can have full tracks, you can have bits of tracks, you can, so what I would do is, because what I found is when you're triggering loops and you're improvising on the fly, the set can sound a bit disjointed. So I would blend full length tracks, and then I would go into a section of like improvised stems or loops, and then go into another full track, and I'd kind of keep it moving like that, so you've got the best of both worlds. And then I might even pull up a looper and jam out my own kind of break or synth sequence or whatever, just to decorate, or sound effects over the top. And then obviously you've got the vocal stuff, and this stuff here comes from the Ableton packs, that if you go into packs over here, you've got loads of different packs. Or I got an email today to say that there's a free Ableton backed by a producer, and not only for a performance tool, but as a compositional tool. So what you can do is, and what a lot of the house and techno producers do, and a lot of producers use Ableton actually, they will spend a day, a month, a year just jamming out their own loops, and they will organize those loops into percussion, kick loops, bass loops, and they'll organize them into keys: F minor, G minor, C major, A flat minor. And then they'll just have a day of like, because you can record that. So basically what you do, you hit record, and I'll show you what it does. So like,
flick your crossfader over, Andrew. I think it's all the way to the right. That's why Blind Man didn't play.
Oh yeah, good shout. So always check.
Actually, the chat that told me that. It was the chat blew up with that. I'm just relaying.
There you go. Always check that crossfader. I've done that in a club before as well. Done a lot in a club, to be fair, but yeah, that's caused a problem when I've been DJing. But yeah, that's definitely one of them. Barely remembering DJ sets half the time when my alcohol binging days. But there you go. Those days are behind me. So where was I? Yeah. So what you can do, you can hit record. And then, bang, it's arranged. So what you can do, look, I see Raf like, oh my gosh, I need to get into this. So basically, like I could do live remixes on my own tracks, just have all the stems and just, and I guess the beautiful, and this is me I don't even work like this, and there's me bigging it up, because it's an amazing workflow. But the reason I don't work like this is because I still use Logic. But I must admit, I reckon in the next few months you're going to see me coming over and working this way, just to kind of have that extra perspective and that different way, that different workflow, because you know it goes back to like some of the tips we give on writer's block, when we say just sound design for a few days or jam out a few loops, because I love sketching. I can sketch loops and boiling pots all day long. Then I get a bit bored, and I'll be honest, I don't love arranging, but to arrange in this way where it's like a performance, and you're like, if you want that hi-hat to just be on its own for 5 minutes because you're enjoying it, then so be it. That's based on feeling, right? And that's what will happen. And that's why you find that like a lot of these well, techno's kind of like that anyway, but a lot of these tracks, they might feel a bit different in their arrangement. And anyway, it's just a quick, short, sharp way of using Ableton as a performance tool, both as DJing. If you're brave enough and you're accomplished at playing on keys, I know somebody spoke in the chat earlier about asking advice on hooking up external instruments or like the TR, the Roland stuff, or synths and stuff. We can't get into that today, but people do. When I was teaching, we used to have bands that have like the computer with Ableton, somebody triggering loops, and then you have a vocalist, and then you have someone recording into the Ableton looper, which is really powerful. So if you're kind of like a musician and you want to kind of take it down that road, it's very, very, very powerful and can just give it a whole new perspective, which is a lot of fun. So that's my little bit there on Ableton as a performance tool. But not only that, but using that clip view there. If you don't use it like this already, I urge you to try it. Spend a day, a week, jamming out your own loops or sourcing loop packs from wherever. You know, there's a lot of good libraries out there with people give away their stems for remix competitions, so you can cut them down into like 4-bar loops or 2-bar loops, and then you can start to create these sessions. And you could probably sit there and jam out a whole album in a day, in a performance, like a DJ set. So that's me done. Obviously, there's a lot that we've gone through, and again, you don't have to remember it all. We'll make the archive available, but we will open it up to any questions. If you have asked a question already, obviously the chat's got a lot in there, so please just drop it again so they're at the front and we don't have to scroll and potentially miss your question. But yeah, by all means, drop a comment in the questions. Do you have links for your Instagram or YouTube accounts? Yes, we will drop them in the chat.
Yours is Nomine Sound, Andrew, yeah? The Insta.
Yeah, Nomine Sound on most things. Any tips for using this methodology when you want to just use one audio sample? What, so playing? Okay, so are you talking about not a loop and just having a hit at a certain place in the sequence? Yeah, you can create clips, you can create MIDI clips as well. So it's not just audio. So you can jam out a MIDI clip like Raf was doing there with the string and the bass in MIDI in the sampler. You can do that. It doesn't have to be audio. So you can create a MIDI clip as well that can be modified. Yeah, that's the one. Advice on song arrangements. Me, just go and copy some of your favorite tracks. Yeah. Analyze them, write them down, stick them in the DAW, have a look at the waveform, how long is the intro, how long is the breakdown, how long is the drop, and just copy them. It's the best way to learn arrangements. You'll realize within the genre or subgenres you're into, there's a few different ways to arrange. They will all follow 8s, 16s, 32s for the most part. And then you'll soon get into kind of how it was a challenge for me. Have you got any quick fire tips on arrangements, Raf?
Yeah, the same, mate. I think you nailed it, really. I think the best thing is just to analyze arrangements. If you've got a bunch of tracks that you like, open them up in something like Ableton, actually look at them and look where the intro is, look where the drop is, and just analyze them. And yeah, in every genre or every style or subgenre, you're only going to find a few different sort of arrangements, variations, let's say. If you're making that more sort of club music, I know that it can get quite abstract sometimes, and then it's a free fall. You can do whatever you want, but for club music, it's to some degree it's quite formulated. So just analyze it and visualize it is the best way, I'd say.
Yeah, I used to, back in the day, when we used to write on paper, I used to just write down what I heard and how long I heard it for. So hi-hat, 30 seconds. Oh, what's that sound? Didn't quite know what it was, but a sound came in. And literally, if you take one of your favorite tracks that's similar to the one you're working on, or the same sort of style, and literally copy the arrangement to a T, meaning wherever they've got a drum sound, you have a drum sound, but it's going to be your drum sound. Wherever their bass comes in, your bass will come in, but it'll be your bass. And also copy the transitions, because transitions are a really important part of arrangements. How does it go from one section into another? A transition, as little as a reversed ride or just a drop out of some of the drums just for part of the bar, can be a really, really powerful transition. And the transition can actually make or break an arrangement. So literally just copying. You know, imitation is the best way to learn. Like, it really is. Like, and we're talking about synthesis and presets and compressors. If you just copy, we call it reverse engineering. If you just reverse engineer how that person made it, or you analyze it and you try and work it out, it's the best way to learn. It really is. And it doesn't mean you have to copy people's music and release the same music. You know, do a bunch of remixes as well. If you get hold of remix stems, you will see how that person, that producer, has arranged that song in its entirety. And then you'll also get an understanding of all the different layers, and we call them stems, all the different stems that have contributed towards that one song. And it will give you a really, really good understanding. So doing remixes and analyzing is really, really powerful. There's a lot of questions. I think what we might do is we might set up a little Discord as well for this particular group, and kind of like keep the conversation going over a duration of time and trying to support some more questions. But we'll get into a couple more. What are ghost snares? I know, Raf, you've been getting into that recently. Go on.
Yeah, so the easiest way to explain it, if you imagine a drummer and you've got your kick and your snare, kick, snare. But then after the snare, you might have a couple of little snares. So it's like kick, snare, snare, snare. So it's like the would be the ghost snares. They're kind of just filling the gaps. Yeah. So the best way to sort of really get into it is look at a drummer playing. So he'll always play the kick and the snare, and the little sort of quieter snares in between. They're the ghost snares. They give it that sort of movement and organic sort of vibe. And you know, I'll do that in my tracks, where it just comes to the end of a bar, and I'll just put a few snares in there that are a lot quieter than the other main snare, and that's a ghost snare essentially.
For all you drum and bass heads, it's all about those triplets and ghost snares. Like the triplet kind of rolls that come off the main snare that give it that groove.
It's what give it that sort of that movement, you know, because if you've just got a clunky kick and snare, I mean, it can work and it does work, but when you start getting them little ghost snares in there moving about, along with other little bits of percussion bouncing off it, that's where you get them grooves, and where you sit and you think that's just moving, man, you know. So how not to become frustrated quickly because you have the feeling your stuff sounds bad. Well, let me tell you something, you might not get rid of that feeling forever. It's one of those things that, you know, you're always kind of second guessing. You know, we're very insecure beings, us kind of, we're always looking for that, you know, reassurance and whatnot. We always progress, and we always measure up against what everybody else is doing, and are we as good as that? So it's not a feeling that I think will ever go. Obviously you'll get more confident, but I guess, don't feel bad. If you genuinely feel like your music isn't up to scratch, then just take it on the chin, because it's for you to accept that and to embrace it, you know, and it's easier said than done. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy at all, because the more you put in and the less you feel like you're progressing, and maybe you don't get record labels don't get back to you, or producers or DJs don't get back to you. It can be very demoralizing. But I think you're always going to be your own your best critic, and, you know, in the sense, the best for you when critiquing your music, and to have some people around you that you trust, and just don't, you know, try and condition yourself to take that and just always want to better yourself. And there's nothing wrong with it. If your music's not up to scratch, you need to be honest with yourself. If you're feeling that it's not good enough, maybe it's not, and that's not a bad thing. You know, because it means you've got to continue. And my biggest tip is you've got to be real with yourself. Would you put your track up against your favourite track at the moment? Hand on heart, is it up there? Is it even close? Because as a beginner, I got so lost in my own progression, which I had to acknowledge and I had to pat myself on the back for, but I was kidding myself. I was gauging my knowledge and my growth of knowledge and my ability, and getting it skewed on whether I thought it was good enough to be out there, and prematurely sent demos out. But when I listened back and I play, I was like, what was I thinking? Just because I got better, it didn't deserve to be out there, and I wasn't being honest with myself. And actually I cut myself short, because when a few record labels did listen to me, they might listen the first time, but if you're not honest with yourself and
let your music out too soon, too prematurely, then you know what good music is. You know what good music is. You listen to it all the time. You decide what you want to stream, what you want to buy, what you want to part, if you buy vinyl or if you buy music or if you choose to stream it. What are all those reasons that you choose to engage with that music? And if you wouldn't do it to your own music, then it's not good enough. Is my, you know.
It's true. It's true. You have to be real with yourself. Like, even if it is a bit soul destroying sometimes, but that's how you learn. And for me, one of the things that I really had to sort of really ask myself the question, why do I make music? Why do I actually sit in the studio 20 years, day after day, hour after hour? Why? Is it to get likes on Facebook, tunes released and signed? Some of it. You know, everyone likes to be told they're doing good stuff, but I recently just discovered that for me, it's the learning process. Nothing more, nothing less. And it's all about learning. What can I learn today? Even if I start a track and I finish it and nobody even hears it, what did I learn from that process? And for me, I'm good. I'm happy with that, knowing that it's all a learning process. And all of a sudden, you know, you end up with a bunch of tunes and you're like, you know what? These are actually all right. They're good. And they're getting better and better. Like, perfection is in the eye of the beholder, you know, and you might be sitting on music that to someone else might blow their mind. But it's all about what you think. And you never stop learning. And that's the beautiful thing. You can't ever stop learning. Like you ever get to a point and go, that's it. I've made it. I'm the best. What do you do then? Because you're probably not the best. Because someone out there, you can listen to their music and go, oh, I'm not the best. Someone else is. Well, they're not the best. They're just doing their thing. Cross-referencing as well. It goes back to that. Just be honest. Open up the best producers. Put it up there with the best producers. One thing that my football coach told me when I was a kid, goes, look, if you want to be the best at football, play against the best. Don't play against rubbish players and rubbish teams. You'll come away from there winning 10-0 and you'll feel amazing. But what have you learned? What have you done? Play against the best. When you start playing against the best, you can class yourself as one of the best, you know. So learning, it's all about learning. And then from that, everything else that manifests is a byproduct of my learning. If I get signed to a huge label, if I get signed to a major, if I tour the world, that's a byproduct of me being open to learning every single time I open up my door.
Yeah,
not my front door, my digital audio workstation.
I mean that question right there is a masterclass in itself. There's a lot we can say about that, but yeah, just being real and just sticking with it, because it's tough. It's not easy.
And have people that are honest. Like I have Andrew that will just be straight up honest. He will either ring me and go, "This is sick," or he'll say, "Do you know what? It's good, but your snare's a bit fluffy, or there's something going on there." Oh yeah, of course you're right. And you know, you have them close people. I just have Andrew. I'm lucky to have digital there as well, who'll be quite honest with me, but I trust these people, and that's a really important thing, is having almost like a mentor there that you trust, that you know, I can send him this track, I know he's going to be honest, and that's what you need as well. It's very important.
Definitely. Do you feel guilty for lack of productivity with music? Sometimes it just won't work and getting stuck in a rut. What do you do to get out of it? So yes, I used to always feel guilty because I don't have an addictive personality, I have an obsessive personality, and it's not healthy. I think balance is key. This music game, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of consistency. It will eat you up, spit you out, and not consider anything you've done to it to help the music industry or the scene. It is a ruthless thing. You've got to be strong, you've got to be patient, you've got to be consistent. Yes, I used to feel guilty. I used to think I used to have to be making music for 12 hours a day, but that's just not healthy in life, full stop. So my therapist said to me once, a happy person is one that can sit by the riverbank all day and not feel guilty. And for me, suffering from anxiety at the time and the place that I was in, it really resonated with me because of my anxiety. I'm always trying to fill that void, to be doing something, to be productive, and I always felt like I had to be working and a workaholic. So yes is the answer. I have felt guilty, and to get out of a rut, step back and just step back in hard. But it is tough because consistency is really, really important. I mean, if you're talking about writer's block and stuff like that, like we said, you don't always have to be sitting there and making a track or writing a track. Sound design, learn a new course on sound design or synthesis, and then start making music again, or sit there and create your own sample pack, learn compression, learn what EQing is. Just keep yourself in there. I always used to say, if I don't go to the gym 5 days a week, and the days I didn't feel like it, let me just go and stick my toe through the door and see what happens. I might not work out, I might just walk in and grab a Lucasade and walk back out. If I walked in the gym, I'm working out. It's as simple as that. So you've just got to show up, and whether you've had a most productive day and written 15 tracks, or you've just processed a hi-hat, well done. Well done for getting in the studio.
For me, it's just sound design, really. I everything I do, I get in the studio and I'm sound designing. I'll fire up my synths, I'll start tweaking some sounds, throw some drums in there, and a track will manifest from that. I don't get writer's block. Because I'm not really chasing them releases. I mean, look, like I'm 38 years old. I've had multiple releases on high profile labels. I've done great things. So I kind of get it that it's easy for me to sit and go, not fussed if I never release again, I'm having fun. Great. Because if you haven't had the success that I've had as an artist, then and you want that, then I get that, of course. But I do truly believe that because I get in the studio with a mindset of just sound designing and learning and using plugins that I don't really use much, or just having fun, and then a track will be a byproduct of that. It will manifest from that. And next minute, whoa, we've got a track there, cool. And that's how I do stuff. I mean, there's times when I'm working on a track and it changes about 5 or 6 times over the course of a month, because I'm like, there's something there, but I'm just not sure. There's something there. And the next minute, you change a snare, you change a kick drum, or you bring a break in, and you're like, there it is, I got it. As soon as I have that there, I can park that up. I'm good then. I can go about my business, and I know that I've got a track that's going to be finished. So sound design for me is it. It's what we do. That's all of it, is sound designing.
And the byproduct thing that Raf's mentioned a few times now, it's just that activity. I think your expectations can ruin you in this game. Don't expect too much. Don't sit there going, I'm going to make a banger today, because it's not going to happen. You're not going to make a banger. You need to make 10 tracks, and one of them might be a banger. And if it's not, so what? Make another 10, and you might make the one you really like.
You don't decide what the banger is. The people, the followers of your music will decide the banger. Trust me on that. I've made tracks before where I thought, oh, this is a big one. This has got it all, the mix, the sound, the idea, and it falls flat on its face. And then there'll be a track that I'll throw together in an hour for a purpose or something, and it's the biggest stream track I've had in 2 years. And I'm like, I don't get it. It's up to the masses. They decide the banger. So don't get in the studio and go, I'm going to make the next big tune, because you're not going to decide what the next big tune is. Your followers and people that hear it will decide that, because trust me, just enjoy, make what you make, and it will be the most unlikeliest of track that will blow up, and you'll be like, that's mad. I don't get it, but there we go.
We'll do a couple more questions, because it's been a very, very long day, and we love this, and we will sit here all night, but we're not going to. So we'll do a couple more questions, and then we will be in touch. Maybe set up a Discord or a group and kind of keep in touch, and we will have more of these sessions as well. Let's have a look.
Sorry, I just want to just quickly jump in. I think Billy Kettle wouldn't play against Spurs then. Great point though. Hey, I just need it. I think I didn't see that, mate. I saw you, Billy.
Let's have a look. Would you say that writing a 16-bar block is too complicated for my first jungle track, and simplifying it to an 8-bar would be better? Well, listen, a lot of my we call it a boiling pot, so it's like getting all of the ingredients in together, and like Raf demonstrated, it's working down before we work across. So when you do the boiling pot method, which can be 8 bars, 16 bars, some of my boiling pots are 2-bar loops. Literally a 2-bar loop that goes down like 30 tracks, Obviously, if you're doing something a bit more musical and it's got a chord progression, literally though, sometimes the only time it extends beyond 2 bars is because I've got, I don't know, a little edit or something, but a lot of the time it can be 2 bars. It really doesn't have to be that elaborate. One thing about electronic music, there's a really good audio documentary called The Art of the Loop. It was a BBC 5 documentary. It's like 20-25 minutes, and it's really inspiring, and it just talks about the art of the loop. And you know, the reason we lock into all these grooves in electronic music is the way the pace that we breathe, our heartbeat, the speed that we walk, and it's all in tune with the body and kind of that repetition, and it stems back to tribalism and stuff like that, and dancing to the beat of the drum. And it's those, in electronic music, it's often those short repetitive loops that are what we lock into. It's like hypnotizing. So it doesn't have to be a big elaborate section at all for me.
Yeah.
We'll do one more question. Do you want to pick one, Raf? Last question, and you can like head it up, and then we'll knock it on the head.
Let's have a little look.
Or do you want me to throw one at you?
Yeah, if you could throw one at me, mate. I'm a bit lost in the chat. Not sure where I'm at. I'm still stuck on that Tottenham comment, mate. It's hurt me. I'm joking. Yeah.
Let's have a look. It's more everyone just conversing, and some good knowledge in here, actually. Good feedback. Thanks everyone for getting involved as well. It's always really good to have people engaged, because it's not always about what we say. And that's another thing as well. I guess what we'll end it on is there's no rules. Like, what we might teach you about a kick drum, go and watch another 10 people teaching you about kick drums and see what works for you. And that's the beauty of learning. It's all very subjective. Obviously, you do have things such as music theory and the theory of sound, and even I'm sure people can argue with you about that. But ultimately, music is about having fun and experimentation. All these genres that we know of, and these subgenres, were born out of experimentation and happy accidents. A lot of these techniques that you might learn, it was what somebody did and it worked, and then they decided to share that. And it's often just people experimenting. So first and foremost, just go and make some noise. You know, go and drag some audio into a digital audio workstation, and ultimately we're juggling frequencies, and there'll come a point where those frequencies will resonate with you, and you'll find your own rhythm with it. And that's ultimately what we're here to do. Like Raf said earlier, as humans, if you're a singer or if you're a producer, you will tend to resonate more with a certain key. Like, if you give a lot of singers freedom to sing, 9 times out of 10 they will sing in the same key, because that's what they're comfortable with. I like to write in F minor. Raf likes to write in E flat. Is it major or minor?
Minor.
E flat minor. But I have to force myself out of F minor, otherwise I'm just going to do everything in F minor. And I use the circle of fifths, and I'll pick a key and I'll just work in that key, because but I just love it. I love, you know, and so my point is, experiment, make noise, and just be consistent and have fun. Because the minute you start getting caught up in thinking, you know, we have said be brutal with yourself, in the sense of, it's a bit of a kind of double-edged sword really, because you've got to be brutal with yourself if you think or feel your music is ready to be out there in the big old world, which is, you know, standards are high. But at the same time, enjoy the ride. And like Raf said, it's all kind of a byproduct of the activity you put in. You know, it's not to be zen, but yes, to be zen, it's all about the activity, and the rest will fall in place, man. Focus on the activity, the learning, the creating. Because I used to sit there thinking about the tour I was about to go on, and like what record label would want to release the track, and that can all be good and it can be motivating, but it can mess your head up as well. I wasn't ever in the studio. It's a part of my anxiety. My mind's either 6 million miles ahead, anxious, or 6 million miles behind, depressed. You know, we've got these vivid imaginations that try and create these scenarios in the future which can mess our heads up. And then we've got great memories, and we remember a lot of negative stuff that can create depression. So enjoy the moment, enjoy learning, and enjoy creating music is where I'll end it on, and I'll let Raf kind of end with a nugget there.
Same. It's again, I'll throw another curveball in there because I was speaking to Andrew the other day. I was going, making music so stressful, stressing me out. But you know, I've got a very, for me, I spend 70% of my time on the mix down. I really geek out over that stuff, and it sometimes stresses me out. But I tell you what, when I get it right, oh wow, I feel amazing. So that's my own little thing that I've got going on. But most of the time, when I finished a track and I've wrapped it up, or finished, quote unquote, it's only ever abandoned and not finished. When I've got a blank canvas, I'm laying in bed thinking, I can't wait to get up at 5 tomorrow morning. I'm like a little kid because I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm going to get some drums up, or should I start with a bass? I'm already writing stuff in my head, and that's where you want to be. I've been doing this for like 20 years, and I'm enjoying it more and more as I progress, because my understanding, I've unlocked little doors and stuff, and look, you know, I've got an addictive personality, and I'm just glad that I'm addicted to making music and nothing else. And probably coffee as well, but hey, we've all got our vices. But yeah, just I know it sounds zen and cliche. Just enjoy it, and just let fly, do your thing, and anything else is a byproduct. You know.
Nice one, Raf. We've had a couple of questions there. Just I'd like to address about the course. On the course, do you have access to everything straight away, or is it released in stages? So the EBRSL course, because it's 90 hours long, we drip feed it in, and we like to work with you on that journey. So we'll have sessions like this for our classes. We'll do feedback sessions, and we like everybody to be kind of on the journey together. What we do though is, if for example the early stages are too easy for you, because you might be kind of a little bit more well versed on certain areas, we will give you other stuff to get stuck into. So we'll signpost you to other stuff on the site that's kind of, we call it differentiation. So you might have you might have people in a class that are on the same course that are at different levels, not drastically, but you know, a beginner can be someone that's been making music 3 years or not at all. So we kind of make sure we cater for all of the different abilities. So rest assured, there'll be stuff for you to get stuck into, even though, you know, you might only have 2 hours of lessons for that week. If you want more, you know, we give you more, plus you can always ask us, and we will divert you into areas of a similar subject that will kind of keep you on the right track, building in the right order, because we've created this course to really kind of build upon the foundations to get you to where you need to get with no stone unturned. Yes, Chris, the syllabus, if you check the link out on the website, we'll drop it in the comments again, for the course. There is information on the actual what we cover, and there's also a link through to RSL as well, which goes through to more detail. But if you message us on the site, there's a chat thing, or you can send us, in fact, we'll drop an email address in the chat as well. If you want to hit us up, we can send you more information about how that works. But yeah, we're enrolling now to start in April. Sorry, Raf, what's the date on that again?
So the course kicks off on the 9th of April. Enrollment closes on the 8th of April.
And you need about 3 hours a week, and that includes the learning and then like an hour of practice. But the more practice time you have, the better to kind of, don't forget you're working anywhere between a grade 1 and a grade 6. So anyway, you could also just sign up to the site, and there's a freemium, actually you don't even have to pay. There's a freemium version of the site with like 300, 400 videos that you can go and watch for free. So you can go and just check the free content, and if at any point you want to dig a bit deeper, you can choose to do so. We will be doing more of these as well, and we'll reach out to you when that time comes and it's more kind of beginners level. But I'd just like to say thank you very much, and yeah, it's been amazing to have you, and hopefully you choose to embark on this journey with us of making music, because it is an interesting one. And I talk about us as in the music makers of the world.
Yeah,
it's a worldwide
one as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming and listening to us and entrusting us to share our knowledge with you. So big up.
Yeah, we will email you when the recording goes. It'll probably be on YouTube, or if not, it'll be on a free part of the site or something, but we'll work it out and we'll send you a message if you'd like to watch it back. And have a good evening, great rest of the week and weekend, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Salute.
Peace.